I do appreciate y'all having me back again. I've been just working with this club for, gosh, 20 years or whatever, and y'all have always been real supportive. Um, uh, I really dove into sharpening like 25 years ago when I started turning because I discovered right off that if your tools aren't properly shaped and sharp, that it makes your task of wood turning extremely difficult. And I got fascinated by it, and I started studying everybody's approach that I could meet, and watch intently and read about it and watch videos. And this was actually before we had even DVDs. My earliest video was produced in that I have was produced in the year 2000, and it had John Jordan and Bonnie Klein and Bill Johnston and Alan Lacer. Each one of them presented a segment. I sat down in the middle of this past week and watched it again, getting my mind set for doing another demo on sharpening. And one of the things that I noticed in there is each one of them, and this is typical, each one of them had their own little things that they did that you probably didn't see the others doing, but they all had similarities too that overlapped. And I was fortunate enough to spend a week with John Jordan at Airmont and learned, more about not only his sharpening but his turning, and it was quite interesting. But he was on some kind of pain medication because he just had his knee replaced, so I wasn't real sure what he was saying sometimes. But I remember this: that he set up the grinder with a vari-grind and everything, and he took a piece of paper and he taped it right here. He had a skull and crossbones on it and says, "Do not change anything." I was like, okay. He was tough about it, and I understand. Um, but what I did was probably when I was into my turning interest for a couple of years, I discovered that I wasn't getting what I needed out of the systems that were available to help me do the things I wanted to do, or to meet my expectations. Maybe that's the way to describe it. And I came out with I designed a sharpening system called the Vertical Solution, and I took it to a club meeting. I was a member of the hands-on wood turners at that time. They were in Dunellen, and I was showing it to them. A lot of people got enthused about it, and they said, you need to make a bunch of these and take them to the Florida Symposium." So what's that? And so at that time the systems were welded, so I had my friend that does welding to build a whole bunch of them for me. I took them to the symposium. I have a full-time job. I didn't need this. And I took them to the symposium and I sold every one that I took. I was like, oh no. But since then, I've come out with several different versions, little changes in each one to make it easier and less expensive. And to date, I went out of business in September of last year. And in the course of that period of time, I sold about 2,000 systems. And that was just, going to symposiums, going to club meetings, that kind of stuff. So I think what I've got is a viable system. And it's what I'm going to show you tonight is how I use it to sharpen gouges, but also how you could go home and make it on your own. So it's my gift to wood turners, to reveal whatever little information there is. They're welcome to it. And I'm in the middle of about 2/3 of the way through writing the complete instructions on you building it yourself. And it's not anything. It's cut a piece of wood, put a magnet in it, paint it red. I mean, it's not like a segmented project or something. So I wanted to start by asking y'all some questions. How many of you are using a two-wheel bench grinder for your sharpening? Something similar to this. Is anybody using a like a Tormek type system? Is that in addition to? It's just in, okay, instead of. Out of the ones that are two-wheel bench grinders, are there 6-inch? Anybody running 6-inch? Good. Glad to hear that. You are? Okay, I'll remember that. I just didn't know whether I should explain the differences that one would expect between a 6-inch and an 8-inch. I'll speak very briefly about that. And are most people using 1800 RPM or 3600? 1800? Yeah. Okay. That's okay. I forgive you, but no. I'm always interested in what people are generally using. And I guess the other question too is, are there any of you? I know the CBN wheels came on like a freight train a few years ago. Is anybody using stone wheels today? There you go. You can admit it in front of your friends. I use stone wheels myself. I've never bought any CBN wheels. I've borrowed some and practiced with them and used them in symposiums that were provided to me, and also at schools. They're a great thing in a school because, you know, they're easier, I think, for some people to operate when you've got a little or no vibration. You know, that's a big part of it. But I latched onto these from the very beginning of my turning interest. And I want to say first that I'm using 1800 RPM. I'm using Norton 3X wheels. 3X wheels come in two varieties. One has a 30% ceramic content in the aggregate, and the other one has 60%. And as you would have guessed by me expressing those percentages, the 60% is twice as expensive as the 30%. I've never bought a 60 ever. I've always just used these. And there was a time when these were running $50. I think they're 65 or something now. And then in terms of the grit levels, I'm using an 80 grit and a 46 grit. And the 80 grit suffices quite well for I finished sharpening, you know, for producing the bevels and edges that I desire. But a lot of that is I attribute to having properly dressed the wheels. So my wheels are balanced, they're dressed, they don't vibrate much, but you can produce really good results. Any of y'all are using the T-shaped dressers, the diamond dressers? Yeah, most people probably do. I came out with a dresser years ago that is different in that I don't know where let's put it here. Can you see that? This particular one has a half-carat diamond at the end. It's on a threaded shaft, and the diamond is advanced or retarded using this knob here. And there's a shoe on the bottom that can be adjusted for different widths of tool rests, but that enables you to traverse across across the width of the wheel, and then advance it ever so minutely. And what this does for you is it produces a concentric surface on your wheel. Whereas if you're using handheld devices that I'll try to hold still and so on, you'll find that they don't actually make it completely concentric. But I wrote an article that was published in the AEW, and you can look it up. You look up my name and in the archives and look for the article and what issue it's in. But in that, what it was is how to tune up a grinder. And again, I was dissatisfied with the way that my grinder was operating. And so first order of business when you tune up a grinder that I found was that these blue multi-piece bushings that go in the middle of the wheel, they're supplied with the wheels, allow the wheel to settle with gravity, to settle off center. And so when you tighten up the nut and you start running it, the mass is off center. So even if you true the outside of it, maybe using a dresser like that, then the mass is still off center. So what do we do to correct that? I tried several different things, but I found these drill bushings. And it's a drill bushing that would be put into a fixture where a machinist drills 10,000 times through this one hole, and it guides the drill bit down through there. They make it in a 5/8 ID, 1-inch OD, and 1-inch length. So it matches the hole in the wheel perfectly. So you put that on, and it's mounted that wheel concentrically just by doing that. I'm going to be passing a lot of stuff around, and I'd like to get some of it back later. Excuse me. The drill bushing, you can get them at McMaster-Carr. You can probably get them on Amazon. Everything else is on Amazon, but I never bought them there. The other thing that happens with a grinder, not real loud all of a sudden, is, sorry, okay, it sounds like I'm screaming. I have hearing aids, and it's real difficult to define, how loud things are. So the other thing that I found that was inferior in the way that you get when you first get your grinder is I gotta keep remembering this. I'm more of a walkout in the audience, here. The washers that go on either side of the wheel are typically just stamped metal. They aren't true. And so if you put one of these on each side of the wheel's going to wobble like that, left and right. So what I found is Freud, the manufacturer of the circular saw blades, make a circular saw blade washer that fits perfectly in replacement of these. And it's got a little bit of relief here, so whenever you tighten on it, it tightens and aligns that wheel better. And then even then, sometimes you'll find that the wheel has some wobble in it. So what I ended up doing was, this is for a 7-inch, but I make these with a little CNC machine and take that paper disc and put it on the side of the wheel with some adhesive, this photo mount, and then take your pencil and put it on the tool rest and apply it to the surface here, and it'll go tick, 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 because the wheel's wobbling a little bit. When you identify where that apex is, then you can go in and install little shims. And what I use are just price marking shims, just dots. And I put it between the edge of the washer and the wheel. It moves it over so slightly at that point that was the apex. And when you look at the line that's left with the pencil, If it's really short, it's a very severe amount that is out. Because you think about this, if it goes all the way around, it's perfect. So you try to get it so that it's about at least 75% of the way around. I'll say that's pretty good. But using those practices really helped me a lot with my grinder. In the AAW journal, the first page of the article, I've got a glass of wine resting on my tool rest right here. And it was this grinder, and there's not even a ripple in it. And so it's all about tuning up your grinder. Any questions about that? Everybody's going to rush home and do it? Yes. Thank you. Very good point. Wheels are made or they're rated in hardness from A to Z. A is the softest and Z is the hardest. When you look at the code on the wheel, you'll see a letter in there. There's a lot of numbers and stuff, and then there's a letter. And what we're looking for in the types of tool stills that we work is K, just like Kellogg's use K. Softer than that, you tend to dig grooves in the wheel with your tool in the middle of the wheel. Harder than that, the tool just seems to kind of slide around on it, and it doesn't really sharpen it. So if you ordered from Packard or probably Craft Supplies, some of these other reputable dealers, I think they only carry K. So, but always make sure you know what you're getting. With your bench grinder, I find that it's best to adjust the position that it's in and the height so that it's accessible for you close to your lathe, so that you don't have to go clear the other end of the shop and around 3 tables and a table saw to get to it, because you don't want to be discouraged from freshening up your edges. So what I do, I raised this table up tonight to get it up a little higher to make it as comfortable for me, but also for you to see better. But a real important thing with your grinder is to have a light. Most grinders today do not come with a light because they want to sell you something you're unsuspecting. Next thing you know, you get it in and you go, I can't see a darn thing, and you have to go buy a light. Okay, that's fine. But get a light. Make sure you got a light. And if it is attached to your grinder, if it's part of the grinder system, well, this one and a lot of others, when you the light would not work unless the grinder was on. Well, a lot of times I want to make adjustments and stuff while the grinder's not running. So I had to rewire this so that I can run the light independently of the grinder itself. It's just things that, you know, you can nod your head and say, yeah. But when you go home, kind of look at what you're doing. I remember working with a guy that hired me to come to his shop for a few days to train him in wood turning. And we were working on it, a big one-way lathe, you know. And I'd say, okay, well, it's time to resharpen. And I said, where's your grinder at? And it was over there, you know. We were working over here. I said, okay, I took a note of that. So we wandered over there, did it, and wandered back. And then later I said, it's time to resharpen, don't you think? And he goes, no, it's all right. And then 10 minutes later, I said, you want to go resharpen again? Oh, no, it's all right. I said, what's the problem? He goes, I get tired of walking over there. I said, let's move your grinder. Now, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I had a question on your sharpening, your diamond sharpening stone.
Mm-hmm.
You run at an angle to the wheel
Mm-hmm.
instead of straight on. How do you do that?
It's at 15 degrees. what he's referring to is this angle here. So see the angle here is at 15 degrees to this side. And that's what that's doing is it presents the diamond at an angle to the wheel rather than being perpendicular. Because diamonds wear each time they come in contact with the aggregate. And as they do that, if you were perpendicular to it, it makes it less and less efficient as you continue to use it. And if you're rotating it with the knob in order to advance it, that's not helping either. So my idea was put it over at 15 degrees and it would act like a pencil sharpener. So we're going to create a small facet on the diamond, advance it, another one, advance it, and keep doing that throughout the life of the diamond. And quite honestly, with as many of these things as I sent out over the years, I came out with these in 2006. I have two models that in 2006, and I thought there was going to be a big razor blade market of selling diamonds. I sold maybe, with as many units that were out there, I was lucky to sell 5 a year. They weren't wearing out. I said, I should have made it straight on. I'll show you an example of that. Wolverine, here it is. Joel moved it earlier, I'm pretty sure. So this is the one way. And the one way, what it does is they've got a 1/3 carat diamond here. And you'll notice that if it was in the receiver, it's addressing the wheel pretty much perpendicular. And there's a set screw here, and you can rotate it and then apply the set screw, tighten the set screw again. But it doesn't address the problem with the diamond becoming flat on the ends. So in my personal opinion, that should be changed. And it's just, I did not come up with the 15-degree idea. I saw this wheel dresser, McMaster car, I believe, and I was just like, God, that thing looks really neat. And I hated those T dressers. So I ordered one and it came in. And like most men, I don't look at the instructions. I just start playing with it. And I'm playing with it and everything, and I look and there's a piece of paper on the floor. And I go over there, I was fascinated with this thing. I go over and pick that piece of paper up and it says, the new Geiger wheel dresser. I swear to God, the new Geiger wheel dresser. I said, it's a sign. It's a sign. But so what it turned out is a guy named Hubert Geiger, quite a bit older than me, and I found out he's not related, came out with this thing years in the 70s. And he had a model that was it was maybe half this size, and it was made for tool rests that were 1 inch and 2 inch wide, front to back. Mine's made for multiple up to 3 inches. Guess what the Wolverine is? The Wolverine's a 3 inch. So I went back to him and we couldn't use his dresser unless you made a cutout around the wheel to get it closer. Otherwise, your diamond was extended way out, your fulcrum was too far back. So I got back to him. I said, could you please think about making a different model? He goes, well, send me some drawings. So I sent him drawings, and he made some for me and made them out of steel. And they worked really well. But he didn't have an adjustable shoe on it. So I get back to him. I said, and after different reiterations of this, he said, I don't want to make these anymore, and this is your design. Do what you want with it. And so I did. And so I actually came out with 3 different models over the years. And he had no objection to that. If you looked at Amazon today, put in the Geiger dresser, That's part 7979, and I don't know what they sell them for, but $90 or so, $100, I don't know. But just realize that's not my product. But he had an article. There was an article in Popular Mechanics in the mid '70s about his dresser. It was really it just blew my mind. The Geiger dresser. I'm not somebody like that bushing that fast around. If we don't bring them back, we tend to get lost. Thank you, Andy. So you're probably looking at me and saying, "Well, why don't we start going to all this trouble? Why don't we wheel balance, use weights?" One way, some other companies make these. You take your wheel off, you get rid of the bushing, you put this in place, tighten it up, and there's a little stand, and there's an axle that goes through here, and you rest it on the stand. Looks like parallel bars. And it'll roll until it stops, and the heaviest part's downward. So you put a weight in here, right there, and then it'll let go of it and it'll roll again. And you keep doing that till you get the weights in a place that it doesn't roll. So you tighten those in, and you come back and you tighten it in there, and you turn it on, you're like, oh, wow, that thing is smooth as a baby. It's not vibrating at all. But then you go to use your tool, and it's hopping. Because what they're doing is they're treating the symptom and not the cause. Okay, when you balance a wheel, yeah. So if I had a big old lump on here, let's use an extreme example for comparison. A big old lump on here, I could put a bunch of weights and counter for it. Did that correct the problem? No. So I'm in favor of correcting it rather than treating the cause rather than the symptoms.
Geiger dresser is now $117.65.
Maybe I should be selling mine. Okay, so I made another little deal here. The shoe. I'm not here, obviously I don't sell these, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. But the shoe, I don't know if you can see it, but this side's curved on this one. This side's straight. Same thing here. Straight and curved. Why are they curved on that side? It's because there was a bunch of people who owned my dresser that got a hold of me, and they said, can you put a crown on the face of a wheel with your dresser? And I'm like, well, why I couldn't, but I haven't. Why would I want to do that? And there was an article in Fine Woodworking Magazine about cool grinding. It was written by a guy named Maskowitz out of New York. And so I got an issue of that, and I studied it. And I'm still getting these phone calls from people. Okay, not a lot, but 2 or 3 a week. And so it encouraged me to try to do that. So I came out with a design for a tool rest that had a radius on it that replaced the Wolverine tool rest. And this fits on there perfectly. Now I can transfer that curvature to the face of the wheel. And by doing that, I've got about a 64th of an inch crown on the surface of this wheel. It's like, why would you want a crown? Well, according to the article, and it makes sense to me, is that when you're sharpening heat-sensitive tools, such as most fine woodworkers use, they're using carbon steel tools. They would put it on the flat stone, and two things could happen. One, there was so much friction across that width as it was being sharpened that it was detempering their tools. And then the other thing was, if they're guiding like a chisel or plane iron on there, and they happen to vary in the position that they address the wheel with even slightly, the corners would dig a groove in their edge, and they'd have to go back. So by putting a crown on it, then it very narrowly focused the friction point, and by having that crown, there was a little bit of leeway here. Again, that crown's only a 64th of an inch, but that was the purpose of the whole thing. So I came out with this new model that had a way to use it on several different widths and also do crowning or flat, all in the same model. Unfortunately, like I said, I don't have them anymore, so I can butter you up. And now, I would be negligent. I know a lot of y'all are very experienced with grinders, but I would be negligent if I didn't spend a minute or two on safety. Okay. One thing to increase your safety is to be able to see what you're doing. Use a light. Another thing is wear eye protection. Even if you're using like a CBN wheel and it's not likely to explode on you or anything like that, the particles of metal could get in your eyes. It's very advisable to wear protection. It doesn't cost much. It's good money, money well spent. The other thing is I have a magnet here and here, which tends to gather a large percentage of the metal particles. I've seen people do it on CBN wheels, even though they don't have a guard on them. They'll mount it somewhere down here. Now, one thing that I've discovered is these things just get loaded up big time. And it's like always trying to get the stuff off. I couldn't get it off. I found out the way to do it is you take it off, take it outside, use an air compressor and hose and nozzle and go through. All stuff just comes off. It came off I did it yesterday in preparation to come here. So the other thing is when we go to the grinder, you want your tools in a condition that you're only going over there lightly, run the tool on the wheel. You're not over there to force into the wheel and putting a lot of pressure here, because sure enough, you start doing that and you waver a little bit and you come off the side and you're pressing that direction when it happens. And you can get severely injured that way. We've had people at the schools have to go get stitched up, get their fingers stitched up or whatever. But get your tools in good condition, and also keep these wheels clean so that you're not having to apply pressure. Because what these wheels do is they get a buildup on them. It's called glazing, and it's where the metal particles are embedding into the aggregate, and it makes the wheels very inefficient. I didn't mention something. When you suspect, if you're standing, we're back here, and you look across the room, how could you tell that wheel was out of balance, not running concentrically? You look for spots. If there's a spot here, a spot here, a spot here, a spot here, it's because your tool is bouncing at a harmonic frequency on the surface of the wheel. So I had a lot of fun with that. I'd go into somebody's shop. I'd go, your wheel's not running concentrically. What I do? The guy's like, what? He said, how do you know? You haven't even been in the shop yet. I said, see those spots? You got to get rid of that. How do you do that? Just like I explained to you. But watch out for distractions. Your telephone, your friends come over, your spouse tells you it's time for lunch, whatever. When somebody starts talking to you and you got to answer them, lift away. Then address what it is they need. Pets, you don't want your dog to come up and bump you while you're doing it, trying to get petted. I was helping out a 15-year-old young man one time, and he got a mini lathe and a grinder and all this stuff. I said, okay, I'll come by someday. Yeah, that'd be great. So he was all excited, showing me his stuff. And he goes over, and I got my grinder set up. I want you to look at it and all that kind of stuff. And he was starting to sharpen. I said, wait. And he says, what? His brother and 2 or 3 other kids were playing basketball about right there. There was a hoop. I said, they're going to get you, you're going to hurt yourself. And they're going to hit you with a ball or run into you or something. He goes, oh. Kid went out and built his own little shed for all of his stuff to get away from him. Anybody think of anything else in terms of, I got one. I always had another one, right? Okay, so when you need to sharpen like a spindle roughing gouge, a spindle roughing gouge, or a traditionally ground bowl gouge, if you look in the manuals that come with your system, they talk about putting your tool in here, resting it on the wheel, and rotating it, right? Very, very, very dangerous. It's best to put it on a tool rest over here, and so you've got support so it doesn't go downward. Because when this pinches, this one's not even long enough here, but when it pinches between here and here, that tool comes down. Something's got to go. It'll rip these out. And on a spindle gouge, this is a spindle roughing gouge. It's sharpened at about a 45-degree angle. And whenever it catches there, this tang right here breaks, bends or breaks, and this can become a missile or go down to land in your foot. So please don't do that. Sharpen them over here. So you'll notice maybe all of my V notches have been cut off, and that prevents anyone from doing that. It also helps in terms of travel, so you don't have to deal with something this long. Since I was driving here, I decided to throw this one in the truck. Y'all just have too many questions. Okay, if you got it, especially if you've got something to contribute, especially in safety, let me know.
When you cut off the arm.
Sorry, what?
When you cut off the arm, about how much do you bleed?
When I get my gouges set up and the arm's in a specific position for that, anything sticking out of the back is cut off. I've been in people's shops who have drilled holes in their wall behind the grinder. So, well, I'm going, what the heck did you do that for? Don't you have a hacksaw? He goes, oh. But they really, I just can't imagine. And when I first built my systems back in 2002 or 2001, I had my arms on them that long to match the Wolverine. I didn't know enough, at that time to know better. And so later I started sawing them off. I had a lot of questions. Why'd you do that? Is that enough? I said, I wouldn't have sawed it off if it wasn't.
I got one other thing, Don.
Sure.
And that is, can you talk about the importance of lining up the socket for the slide directly underneath?
Okay.
If it isn't caught one way or another.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed. What Ed's talking about is mentioning is the importance of having this centered on the wheel, the receiver, and also running parallel to the wheel. And so I wrote an article about the installation of the grinder and the Wolverine receivers. And a lot of people have gotten benefit about that. And I will share that PDF with the club so y'all can put it on the website or whatever you want to do with it. But it's very, very important. But I show in there how to determine exactly where the middle is down here and down here and how to make your adjustments. And to me, forward and back is not a big deal, but you need to be centered on the wheel and you need to be parallel to the way the wheel is running. Very good point, Ed. Thank you. On the Tormek people, what I did was I was given a Tormek for some lessons for a guy, and I got it in. It sat on my bench forever. I thought I ought to put that to use. So I put a Wolverine receiver under it. I raised the whole thing up. I put a Wolverine receiver under it. Had a square tube that came out like this. I put a vertical receiver, came up, and I made a pivot point up here. So then I could do just like I do on my other systems, but do it on, with a Ellsworth jig or a Varigrind jig. So I went to traditional tools rather than going with Tormek stuff. I still have it today, and one thing I do use it for, that makes me think there is another point on safety. That when you are sharpening anything in a jig, and you want it to be greater than 70-degree angle on the tip, like 80, 85, whatever. What that does is it moves that tool way down here, and it'll snatch it downward. With the Tormek, if I had to do anything over 70 degrees, which I've done a few, it rotates in a counterclockwise, in a different, opposite direction. So there's no way it's going to be drawn down and cause a problem. So I did some side ground bowl gouges, the double or triple bevel on them at 80, 85 degrees. And that was really beneficial on the inside of some pieces.
Video. Video.
The Nick Cook, Agar, I'm sorry, okay. Yeah, a lot of people do. I just spoke with a friend of mine that just went to his second class with Glenn Lucas. I had a rather lengthy conversation with him asking about Glenn's approaches to sharpening. And so actually what the guy did is he came home and Glenn's going with like a 55 and a 45 degree angles on his gouges because of the shapes that he does. That works fine. But so what this gentleman did is he came home and he uses my setup and everything as his primary, you kind of call it the basis for everything else. and then he put in some additional changed out to different spacers. So he was able to obtain almost identically what he got when he was with Glenn by just doing those few things. We need to move on, do some real sharpening. I always want to do a wood turning demo. I try to get some shavings on the floor pretty quickly, or else people will go, they're passing out on you. But maybe with sharpening, the same thing too. You need to see some sparks. Sparks. Let's start with that. I can tell you without blinking an eye, this is carbon steel. But if I needed to prove that, what would I do? These guys know. So watch the spark pattern. See how real bushy that is, and it bursts it, it goes down and it separates down at the end. If you were doing high-speed steel, it's a different spark pattern altogether. What it does is it goes down, and it's kind of like a fireworks thing, like a bottle rocket. It explodes at the end. So that's just a quick test. And why is that important to us? Well, you don't want to lose the temper in your steel. And so in order to, like if you're using carbon steel tools, and just usually you'll find those in a lot of the older tools. Maybe you went to a flea market or a garage sale, came home with a set of tools. Better test them, because they lose their temper. Most of the carbon steel lose their temper at about 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Whereas high-speed steel tools don't lose their temper till 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. And so with the carbon steel tools, you want to have a container of water handy, very close by. In fact, you'll see grinder stands with a little cup, built down here below. You quench, you heat it up a little bit and you quench. You heat it up a little bit and you quench. Whereas with high-speed steel, you don't quench them. You'll notice I have no water here. And the reason you don't is because that very rapid cooling of the metal in high-speed steel can actually cause it to fracture. Not the thick parts, but the very fine edges, it can cause it to fracture. So it's just a best practice. Now, if I was changing a traditionally ground bowl gouge over to a side ground bowl gouge, there's some pretty significant amount of metal's got to come off. And I'm going to go on my coarse wheel, and I'm going to be grinding the heck out of this thing, and it's going to get hot. In order to protect myself from getting hurt, I will dunk those. But as I start approaching a final shape and getting near making an edge, I discontinue doing that. Now, if you were to be using the high-speed steel tool and you were turning wood that's been harvested in the last 6 months, it's a little wet, whatever, you can take a handful of those shavings, wrap it around the end, and dissipate that heat safely. And the other thing you can do is you can utilize the mass of the bed of your lathe as a heat sink and put it on there, and it'll cool it a little faster than it would in ambient conditions. But I want to show you now what I primarily use gouges. I use Negitive Rake scraper very, very infrequently. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my normal routine of how I do my sharpening of my gouges. So I've got a stop collar on here, which is attached to this. And when I attach those, notice that the set screw is against the flat part. Don't put it up here on the end. But what it allows me to do when properly set is to change positions. So I calibrate this position, then I use shims. So here's a shim that I just put in, and it's just a rectangular block of wood with 2 magnets in it. And what that's done is that I have predetermined what the position is to here to present or produce a 60-degree bevel on the end of my gouge, which most of the gouges in my shop are 60 degrees. The vary grind, now here's something, a little tidbit. When you're going to adjust the vary grind and the position here, how do you figure out which one's which and which one's doing what? I go by this. I have strong feelings that the position of this variable arm is to adjust the side grind angle on the tool. Moving in and out, you adjust the pitch on the tip, the angle at the tip. So if I go in further, it goes to a lower number like 40. If I go out further, then it moves it down on the wheel some, and it goes the other way. So if I want to go from 40 to 60, I would move it back. If I wanted to go back, push it forward. So that's what I'm using. So I'm saying I always set this first. Well, the thing that killed me when I first got it is like, where do you put it? And everybody I asked had a different opinion. So I had examples of what I wanted to produce, and I used those. So the first thing I do is put this in here. This is a 2-inch thick block with a hole down the middle. Magnetized. It's in a good, convenient location, stably mounted. Got a large flat surface here, which I think is really important. Set the protrusion amount that the gouge protrudes here. And the reason I like this big face on here is if you tilt this in any direction other than perpendicular, it's going to be an unreliable setting. Okay. If I go to the wheel and I'm not getting an exact amount that I wanted, that's the problem. So I'm going to come over here. I want to get this. I used to call it a 2-sided box. See that? It's got 2-inch strips on either side of a piece of wood. There's a shim here and a shim here. And this is blue. So you got blue, yellow, and red. So I want to do my 60 degree, and that 60 degree I know is the yellow surface. So what happens is I know that that's 6 1/4 inches to the top of that little shim. This one's 7 inches. This one's 5 inches. But we're using the yellow one for the 60 degree. I use it for calibration. I use it for 70 and 50 degree on a micro bevel. So all those things are done in this one position. Okay, so I preset this. I put my tool in there. I have that block at a pre-calibrated position. Set this to 2 inches. That's a very close match. You can see the scratch on the end. After I get done with it. Anyway, if you saw what I just did, put it up against here and rotate the wheel by hand backwards. I've pre-blackened that. I don't know if we can get that on the overhead or not. Can you see the scratch? If it's at the bottom or if it's at the top, not across the bevel, I need to make an adjustment. Okay, so what I would do is now go in and sharpen. You'll notice that I stand at the end of the grinder. So in my shop, all my grinders, two grinders are on rolling carts. I roll them up close to where I'm working. I've got a tool rack right here, and I can go in and do this. See where my finger is here? I create a pivot point. I kind of let this part roll in my hand. And I'll just study the look of it and decide we're close. Well, actually, let's do this. This is a 70 degree, has a top. What we got to do to make it steeper? We got to move back a little bit. The other one's at 60. We're going to go to 70. So what I got to do is change the position of this little block to its longest dimension. Put that in. Set my 2 inches. Then I want to do the relief grind, which is 50. So I got to go the other way. So I move it to its narrowest dimension. So what I've done is I've gone from 60 to 70 to 50. Okay. Now I want to do the 40 degree. I'll probably get in trouble calling it a 40-40. But you know, I really don't care. But the elusive 40-40, it cannot be sharpened in a jig. So to do that one, I changed because it's got a different side grind, I changed the position to 7 inches. Position of this arm. So from here to here, 7 inches. Tighten that in. Mount the 40 degree gouge in here. Now what I found is because of this change, I got to move this. It just gets in the way. There's the 40-degree grind. I call it my rendition of the 40-40. Well, an expert could come up and go, well, you know, it could be half a degree this way, but you know what? Cuts wood.
John, I've got the instructions you gave me originally a couple years ago on running stuff, and I have the A, the box has the A, and then the B. Is that a third setting now compared to the original A, B instruction?
That's the B setting. What's different, the third one now, the red one, is for doing a traditionally ground spindle gouge at 40 degrees.
That doesn't have big things.
Right. That's what I'm doing next.
Are your current instructions that you send out contain all three for the box?
No.
You have it updated?
You-
Check it out.
Keep me honest, right? Okay, so there's the 40. Now we're going to go to the spindle. Okay, the spindle's at 40. We're going to change this setting again.
Well, I have two berry grinds. I keep one at the A setting, and I have a label marked A, and then I have one marked B, and I keep a little reference guide by my grinder.
Sure.
But now I need a third berry grind.
Couldn't tell he's a Navy guy, could you? Okay, so what we got to do now is we've changed the position of this to 5 inches, okay, for the spindle gouge. If I put that in here, and I put that in there, I'm not going to get there. So I got to change this position. Well, I did. Took it out. So there's no block. Okay? Lock that in. I set my 2 inches. Still not there. What am I going to do? I can't go any closer. I go with a shim in the V-notch, which forces that tool up on the wheel to get a 40-degree grind. Okay? That's it. Sorry?
What's the thickness of the chip?
3/4. Yeah. And I found out putting magnets in the bottom. He was asking how thick this is. It's 3/4. But I played around with different pieces until I found one that worked. Sir?
That's what I would work.
That's life. I didn't used to have a car that would drive me insane talking to me, tell me I'm doing everything wrong.
But you always told us when we would do it in bevel a lot, what's that grind and then bevel, hey, just stick something in there to give you, that additional bevel. I can't think of what it's called now. Or relief cut or whatever.
Yeah. Somewhere, this is the whole kit. Okay, I want to pass this around so you can see. And I will be having something to put on your website later. But you can see I've marked those widths. So you start with a 7, put in a 3/4, put in a 2-inch block. So, and here's a real interesting thing I decided on is I'm doing all this work and I'm only on this wheel. If I've got a tool that needs a gross amount of change, like when I'm changing a traditional grind, incidentally, if you buy a tool with a traditional grind on it, it's going to be less expensive than one with a side grind on it. And for me personally, even when I buy one with a side grind, I usually change it anyway. So buy the lesser expensive one and learn how to change it over. It takes me 15, 20 minutes at the most. I used to do it at symposiums in my booth, and I would turn around and be 8 people watching me. It's like, what a great attraction, way to draw people in.
When you put your tool into the tool holder, you always go with 2-inch?
Yes.
Is there any reason why you would, I know I've heard some go like 1 3/4 or 2 1/4.
He's asking about why, do I only use 2-inch and why? The 2-inch was carried over from David Ellsworth. David had a setup that I went to his classes early on, and I've assisted him numerous times at Aramont. And David had a 2-inch setting. So naturally, as a student, I went with a 2-inch setting. And then some people like Doug Thompson, one you would know, he uses 1 3/4 inch. Does it really make a big difference? Probably not. But my only logic for that was, if I can get that massive tool holder a little further away from the wheel, I'm that much more happy. I'm just that much happier that I'm a little bit further away. But people used to contact me all the time when they'd buy my system. Well, my hole in my bench is 1 3/4 inch. I go, do you have a drill and a nickel to put in the back of the hole? And well, if you calibrate it with that, if you calibrate the whole system with it, I don't see it makes any difference. But what I used to tell people is, okay, so you went to the store and you wanted to have chocolate chip cookies. You want to go home and make chocolate chip cookies. You start going through the recipe and you throw the chocolate chips out and you put blueberries in. You ain't got chocolate chip cookies no more. Follow the recipe. No, really. I mean, people are funny about stuff like that. I'll say, like, well, I've always used 1 3/4 inch. They don't have any reason why. They don't have any answer for that.
That color you've got on your V-slot is integral to that block that you use, the 3-way block. How do you know where to set that color?
Very good question. That was, believe it or not, read the program. It's next. That was a good one. I like it when people are about a foot ahead, So how that is done is you use a known standard at 60 degrees to do your initial setup. And when I say a known standard, with my systems, I had the standards made on a CNC mill that were accurately at 60 degrees, had a flat facet milled on the top of it, and it had a hollow grind that was a 4-inch radius. And you use that to do your initial setup. Since I'm not making those anymore, what I'm suggesting is to use a 60-degree gouge that has an accurate 60-degree bevel on it. And we haven't talked about this, and there's probably somebody out there that needs this. In order to measure your bevel accurately, use something like this. Line it up along with the bottom of the shaft of the tool and rotate that until, there it is, dead on 60. All right. The other way to do it is to put the shaft inside the flute and do it here, and you can measure 60. So there's two ways to do that. So you get one that's accurately at 60. You blacken the bevel. So I keep my Sharpie handy. Now this only has to be done one time. If you've got CBN wheels, if you've got aggregate wheels that will eventually reduce in diameter a little bit, which I sharpen more than anybody I know. This wheel's 2 years old. I measured it before the Florida Symposium, and it was at like 7 3/4. Not a big deal. But so you put that, you blacken that, you take this, and you put it in the yellow position, which was the 60-degree position. Tighten that in. Put it in here. We had that small tool in there last. Incidentally, for your information, I only use the Varigrind for the 40-40, and I use it for the 40-degree spindle. On the other three, I use the Ellsworth jig. I just find it's easier, it's a little more elegant, easier to hold, more comfortable. Sir? I gotta find it. Here's the Ellsworth jig. Handy. It's real handy. I put it right behind the grinder.
Okay, you use the Ellsworth jig. His instructions say you mount your receivers like a 1/4 inch different from what Wolverine says when you mount the receiver.
David originally published, he wanted you at 2 inches, 4 inches, and 7 inches. So you had a 2-inch protrusion. You had 4 inches down from the center of the axle, and then you had a 4 inches down and 7 inches from the face of the wheel. So he was real critical about all that. Whereas when you use a standard, you negate all of that. Okay. My original systems, which David was using when he passed away, they're still in his shop on his grinders. I didn't know better, and went exactly by his instructions, and I went 2, 4, and 7, and that worked fine. But then later years, I started discovering easier ways to do this. That's probably why he was saying that. But when you do 2, 4, and 7, at 4-inch down, you couldn't actually get there with a Wolverine receiver. Wolverine receiver was restricted from moving up far enough by the guard on the wheel. If there was no guard, yes, you could do that. You could get to 4 inches on an 8-inch wheel. We can discuss that again later, but people are going, what is he talking about? I'm beginning to wonder myself. Okay, so we got a 60-degree reference. I blacken this. I put it in here. I get a visual reference. That's my one, just on temporarily. I think I hit it. It's interesting the way you do this. The first time when I tried, it was right at the top. Y'all could hear it, but it was going. When you hit it just right, you don't hear hardly anything because it's smooth. And right now, that's perfect. Let's see what it looks like. That's pretty good. Maybe just tiniest bit. I'll usually mess it up doing this, but when you make these changes, don't hold it out here. You're going to push and pull, you're going to be all over. I wrap my hand around it. I put my thumb against the receiver and I just kind of squeeze. I hit it. Andy, he's the expert. Expert witness. It's perfect. So as quickly as that. Okay, so this is in the right position now. Now, I'm going to move that collar. So you get the collar out of the way. So this is done with it loose. I go to the 60-degree position, which is 1.5 inches. Got magnets on it to help. So now, if I want to do a 60-degree grind, it's perfect. That quickly. Now, after having done that, I want to go to the 70. Remember what I said? Let's go to the longer dimension. Longer dimension is 2 inches. That's for the micro bevel. Do that. It's going to be perfect. I do the 50, which is the magnets are too good tonight. They're killing me. That's the 50 relief grind. It's that easy. So in my work that I do, which is bowls and a few hollow forms, I use the tools I have to have. It's a 60-degree side ground bowl gouge, Irish grind. Then I have a 70-50 micro bevel, and I use a 3/8 inch convex bevel. Overhead, please. I'll pass it around. It's a 3/8 inch detail spindle gouge, and it's got a convex bevel instead of the concave. So I can reach in and do undercuts here. I can make dovetails with it. There's a number of uses for it, but by having that convex bevel, you can go in there and scoop, kind of advance and scoop at the same time to make a concave foot. Also, it enables you, if you want to do a calabash bowl, to get in here and make those cuts all the way through, removing material and then making those cuts all the way till you sever through and make this all round. And that's done with this. I think. Let's pass that around so they can see it.
So that's the 40 degree.
It's, no, Andy says that a 40 degree, and it's not. It's probably, it's hard to measure because it's a convex bevel, and it's more likely to be a 30, something like that. But you know what? It cuts like a dream. It absolutely cuts like a dream. But those are the 3 tools I live and die by. I can show you how I sharpen that.
When you rotate it, working on your sides, how far do you go, or can you go too far?
He's asking how far to go when you're moving the jig left and right. It's on a regular bowl gouge, like a Irish grind bowl gouge. As you roll it over like this, what I do is I kind of pick a spot here. If I go way too long, it gets way too low, and that's basically addressed by how far I roll this over. Like I'm out up on the little rise right there. Here I'm back on the bevel again. Or would be if I was doing this. But I tend to make my grinds a little long. And tell you a funny story about that. Every time I was with David Ellsworth, it seemed like for a long time there, he would look at my grind and say, Don, shorten it up, shorten it up. It's getting too long and flat. Okay, I'll try, but I tended to like what I was using. So then he came down to Florida and I set robust lathe up for his demos and stuff. David being the rock star of wood turning, he's got this crowd of people around him and he hands me his tube with his tools in it. So Don, go, set up my grinder and pre-sharpen these tools and stuff. So I go over there to the grinder and all these people and him are over there. And I pull his tool out. I walk back over and walk right in the middle of everybody and said, David, shorten it up. His is getting longer than mine. It doesn't hurt anything. I mean, you're using it when it's long like that. You're using it for leveling when you do the outside shearing scrape. And so you have ridges or valleys or anything, you can go over and work on that quite readily. Whereas if you have a short curved edge, then you're less likely to do the same type of work with it. Now, John Jordan was adamant about having a straight edge. And that's what mine basically look like today. And the other thing, most people look at my tools and they'll go, well, did you notice that one of the bevels on one side is longer than the other side? I go, how many sides do you use at a time? And they're like, oh, okay.
When you're grinding, is it possible, you want to always like keep it flat or a little curved, right? Is it possible to keep the other way?
I'm sorry, what?
On the side grind, it has like a curve bump.
Okay, the edge, the profile.
Is it possible, what happens if you go the other way? What do you do there?
I could kick you out of the class. No. No, what happened? He's asking about the side grind profile, and if you've got a concave edge on where the bevel meets the I'm a terrible drawer. I really am. So I don't know if this is very good, but that edge right there is what we're talking about. Like David always prescribed this rather than straight. And then, but if you go where it's like that on the edge, or that's exaggerated, but what happens is it's very, very aggressive at the tip and just wants to dig into the wood, and all the stuff behind it is useless for anything, in my opinion. So it's best to either have it slightly convex, or if you look, we can't look at this, but this is a guide that I always provided in my sharpening systems for people to put on their grinder as a reference. But you can see here, this is an ideal, in terms of what David wanted, is to have that slight curvature all the way through. Is what now?
How do you fix it?
You would grind this part back and just keep working until it comes back, or you can say, that's it, and you'd basically do the operation of, well, I just sawed one off. The guy had it's way back like that. It was real flat, way, way back. Useless as far as I'm concerned. I couldn't figure out any way to use it. And so I took a cut-off wheel and I cut it off right here and then made a gouge out of it. It's the same tool. But I tried it in my electric horizontal bandsaw and it just rode on the surface. It wouldn't touch it. It was an M2 high-speed steel. But in the course of changing a traditionally ground gouge over to a side grind, the first thing you do is you create the profile view from the side. So you get on here and you just do this, this, and then this, till you work it down to where they're like this. You got, looks like that profile from the side, but there's no bevels on the side. And if you look down from the top, it's flat. It's flat just like that, because you've got to take all that mass off on either side. And then you get closer to the actual end product. Then you put it in your jig and put it over here and grind using a coarse grinding wheel and get it even closer, and then finish it out over here. What I haven't told you, and this I think is a really good point. So in doing things like that, I would like to have this over here and this over here. And I'm like, how can I do this? So the key to that is having a second arm, okay, a second collar. Don't get a different block or anything like that. Move these over here, calibrate it to that wheel and receiver position. And then what I'm doing is, remember how I had this at 60 and it was perfect over here? I would use the same thing and I wouldn't take anything out here. I'd just come over here and do this till it matched. And I've done now a match calibration between the two wheels. Why would it be different? Let's say I've got CBN wheels and they're 8 inches and 8 inches. What the heck? Where the difference comes in is how you mounted the receivers. If the receiver's too far, one further forward or backward or whatever, then, you know, it does. So yeah. Did you get the bill for that yet? Okay. But that solved a lot of issues for me, especially if I was changing over. What Ernie and I were doing is buying a ton of these crown gouges. Where was it from? Highland Hardware or something? Yeah, Highland Hardware had a good price on them. I'd order 10 or 20 of them, and Ernie would order one. And well, he didn't go through them like I do. I was selling them. But I would get all these in, and they were traditionally ground, and I'd take a few and do the thing. Got it down to about 15 or 20 minutes. Worked out great. But yeah, Crown and Taylor were the ones that were building gouges for David. And there's a tiny bit of difference in the width of the flute, but I've never found it to cause me any problems. I've got some, in fact, I brought an original Ellsworth with me tonight if anybody wanted to look at it. Oh, something else. Oh, I was going to show you this. So this is a cheap Harbor Freight grinder. I pull my hearing aids out and put on ear protection when I run it. Other than that, it's a great tool. What wasn't so good on it were the belts, the 1 inch wide belts. I go to the store and they only sold 240 grit belts, and that was for grinding wood. I was like, oh crap. So I go back and look around and I find out that it's a standard size belt It was available on Amazon, and I bought a set of silicon carbide belts. The silicon carbide is an excellent material for grinding high-speed steel. So they had it from 250 or 240 up to 1,000 grit, and different. You get 3 or something of each one. It was the typical different grits that we would see. So what I do is get in fact, this is on I don't have a website anymore. I had a video look on YouTube, Don Geiger sharpening detail spindle gouge. There's a little video about it. So what I do is I go over and I start knocking the heel off over here, and I keep doing it. And as I move my body, I rotate like that, and I rotate and I rotate and I rotate, and you eventually make this like the back of a spoon, because you don't want damage to the wood. That's the whole point of doing this, and that's also to narrow this down. Then I put on a 400 or so belt, start running this thing, and the platen goes up to here. And so what I would do is run it, and I would start working here and run it. I start working here and here, and I'm getting close to the edge all the time. Then I'd change it up to a finer grit. What I got on here now is 600. The 1,000 grit, kind of like toilet paper, but it works. But I strongly encourage getting something like this. You don't have to buy Harbor Freight. It was cheap, but I've been using it for years. Never failed me. Of course, it wouldn't work tonight if I plugged it in for anything, I'm sure. But is what? How much?
Problem if we keep changing those belts so there's no regrets.
Well, you got a timer?
It's already too much time.
I've done it a few times. What it is, the wheel back here is spring loaded. There's 3 wheels, and you just put it on the other 2 and then pull it forward. And one of the things you have to be careful of is these, like a bandsaw will track. They don't want to, at least so far, I haven't had a problem with that so far. Like I said, I get home tomorrow, it'll be off. No, thank you very much. But
What's that thing called?
1-inch belt sander. Yeah. Yep, and it was quite inexpensive, as you would expect. Does anybody here use the Sorby belt sanding, tool sharpening? You do? I don't know a thing about it. I know that one of my friends down in Sebring wanted me to come down and help him with wood turning for a couple of days. And I showed up and he had one. He didn't know a lot about it, but he had one he'd been trying to use. And I came in with my system. So he started messing with his, and I installed mine and was turning wood. And he goes, "Aren't you going to set your sharpening system up?" So it's already done. I'm already turning wood. What are you doing? He's trying to get this thing figured. And he goes, "You want to look at it with me?" I said, "No, I don't want to be beat, you know." Oh, I got something real good for you. How many are you doing on time? Oh man, don't give me that much time. Anybody use Negative Rake scrapers? What are you using for?
Cleaning up the space,
Inside also.
the tool parts.
All right. I have one that's made by Robust. And what they do in their tools is they nitride the tool. What nitride does is it increases the Rockwell hardness a fair amount. And then it's a like a pickling type. It's not actually pickling, but it's something like that. It's not a what you call it, plating. It doesn't wear off unless you're grinding it, with a wheel or something like that. And so on their tools, like with Negative Rake scrapers, you have two bevels. You got one here and you got one here. What they want you to do is just grind the bottom one to preserve that nitride on the top. Because if I ground the top and the bottom, then you've ruined the benefit of having the nitride there. So, and then in the event, eventually, that you grind it back so much that you don't have a top bevel anymore, go ahead and grind it. But you're going to be back a long ways on that. So I got really tired of every time I wanted to sharpen something on a platform rest that I had to dilly-dally around with it and adjust things and test it and finally get there. And I want to turn. I want to turn. So I decided to do this. I bought, over the years, I don't know how many of these things I have, 8 of them or something. And I set them to what they're going to be used for. I mark them for what they're going to be used for. And then one thing that I found was if you just set it here and you get it just right, and then you take this out, and the next day you go to use it again, because this isn't in the same place anymore, you got to fiddle with it again. So I solved that issue. Put a stop collar on it. So not only did I adjust this, but I locked this in place. So if I want to match this grind, I should be able to come over, go right to the stop collar. Yeah, I'm a little off. Oh, I wonder if it was over here. Well, I lied to you. It must have been on the other grinder. Anyway, you can set that, slide it into place, it hits stop, go over there and do your grind. I don't know why that's on. I must, like I said, I got another grinder, and maybe I'll set it for that. I don't slam. No. But Ernie was in the shop. He might have changed it just for fun. You got it. I'm gonna get one of those video cameras and put it up in my shop. Keep an eye on you. So here's another one. That's a roughing gouge. So when you're going to do your roughing gouge, or a traditionally ground bowl gouge, where you're going to put it on a tool rest and rotate, right? I found it to be an advantage to try to keep it perpendicular to the face of the wheel by putting some lines here. Gives me something, a visual reference. Now, when you are going to do either one of those tools, you want to keep it perpendicular to the face of the wheel. So if I do this, what it does, my wrist, if I'm bending at the wrist and rotating that tool, it's changing like this. So what I found was really helpful was to do this instead. Okay? You get your stance and put your side of your hand against your hip, match the tool rest, and rotate like that. So it's not wavering. My feet are set. My body is set. I'm doing this. Okay. If I was doing this, it's a mess up. I did that a lot before I figured this out. I was putting a screw cap back on a bottle one day. I went, I'll be darned. They really didn't teach me that.
How do you, where I have issues, I subconsciously either lift up or I have a hard time keeping the tool flush against
I
the
understand.
platform. I gradually,
Well, I think it's just a matter of feel. You know, and I do it too sometimes. I mean, you find yourself up or down a little bit. You know, so it's not flat. I don't know any other way to make it stay there other than just, well, I've got this part of my hand on the edge. You know, so I'm getting an additional benefit from holding on there.
I usually like have sticking a finger inside, force it down in the center of the table.
Mm-hmm.
I use the thumb to push down
Yeah,
on the top, so it keeps.
use your thumb. Yeah, you could probably do this too. I probably do it that way more than I do it this way. But right then I lifted that part. But hopefully that improves your approach to it a little bit. Amazon, and they've doubled in price. They're like $5.50 or something each, and I encourage you going ahead and buying two at least, so you can do the match calibration. I got both boxes back. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, 1 inch ID. I think it's 1.5 inches OD. You want enough thickness to where you got a place to put the magnets. And really, though it sounds like I'm reiterating something that's ridiculously simple, but make sure you rotate that screw point so you're going against the flat. I've had people going, it slipped. You know, why did it slip? What came off that little point down in there? Like, okay. Remember, we're dealing with, even though we're all wood turners, we're dealing with the general public, right? I think we probably ought to wrap it up. You've been a wonderful audience and good questions. Thank you. And I only saw 2 people going to sleep, so thank you.